Hello, welcome to Rooted in the Word. We are following on our reading plan. We are continuing into week 21, where we tackle Philippians, or as my daughter used to say, Philippians. Let's see, I think I wanted to focus on Philippians 3 and 4. Towards the beginning of chapter 3, Paul says, look out for the dogs, look out for the evildoers, look out for those who mutilate the flesh. So this whole section here, Paul is once again warning of false teachers. They are the dogs and the evildoers. Apparently back in ancient times, dogs weren't really pets as much. They just kind of roamed around town and were more semi-feral, less domesticated, I guess. And they were scavengers. So they would go around, scavenge any leftovers, break into trash and stuff, just kind of like you think of in big cities with stray dogs. That was normal for the dogs. That is kind of what Paul is alluding to in that section when he refers to dogs. They are the scavengers who steal food, and in this case are stealing those who would be believers, taking them away from the true faith and bringing them to a false teaching. And those who mutilate the flesh are, he's specifically talking about those who are forcing new converts to practice circumcision, basically, which is pretty traumatic for an adult, at least, I would imagine. So that was something that was preventing many people from actually joining the church, essentially. And Paul will later, or Paul addresses that, saying that we are the circumcision who worship by the Spirit of God and glory in Christ, and put no confidence in the flesh. So basically, that's Paul saying the law of circumcision doesn't really matter. That is more of a personal conviction. If it's something you wanted to do to join the church, you could, if you wanted to, but it's not necessary. I just think it's funny that in, at least so far, pretty much all the epistles that we've read, Paul includes a warning against false teachers, that once again, we are saved through faith in Jesus, not through works. Then in verse 12 on chapter 3, not that I have already obtained this or am already perfect, but I press on to make my own, because Christ Jesus has made me his own. So this whole section, I think that's through, basically from 12 through the end, Paul is kind of talking about what we would refer to as his sanctification. So Paul, again, is saying, I'm not already perfect. Elsewhere, he will say, why do I do the things that I do not wish to do? And he will call his flesh weak. So this is just another thing where if Paul, who is one of, if not the greatest evangelists for Christ in history, literally wrote, I think, almost half of the New Testament, if he still struggles on his sanctification journey, we can have a little bit of grace with ourselves. That just know that this is a struggle that you will have for the rest of your life. You will fall many times. Don't beat yourself up too hard about it. Yes, feel the conviction. Yes, try to change. Be more like Christ on your sanctification journey, but give yourself a little grace, I guess. Because if you are too harsh on yourself, that can create a negative spiral, and can cause more harm than good. Later in the chapter 12 or 17 through 19, basically, brothers, join in imitating me and keep your eyes on those who walk according to the example you have in us. For many of whom I have often told you and now tell you, even with tears, walk as enemies of the cross of Christ. Their end is destruction, their God is their belly, and they glory in their shame with minds set on earthly things. So Paul is inviting us to follow his example and walk in accordance with Christ. Once again, we're not going to be able to fully achieve that until we are in heaven, but it is something we should strive for. And then he warns of there are many who are enemies of the cross, who their God is their belly and they glory in their shame with minds on earthly things. So they just follow their appetites, follow their whims. They proudly boast in things that we would consider sins. They like to boast about how they're free of the shackles, basically. But they aren't truly free of their shackles. They're just making their own shackles, because they are just a slave to their appetites, basically. And that's something we should strive to avoid. We want to have control over our appetites when they are contrary to God. And then chapter 4, there are just a few verses that are commonly taken out of context, I feel like. So I just kind of wanted to highlight some of those. So first is, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Which on its surface is accurate. But we have to remember, Paul is writing this while in prison. He is explicitly saying, implicitly, I guess, he is implicitly saying, even in your struggles, even when life doesn't seem like it could get worse, rejoice in the Lord, because even when everything else is taken away from you, you still have God. It kind of harkens back to Job. Job lost everything, basically, and he never turned from God. And that's something that we need to kind of put in context on things. We in America, even the poorest among us, are living in the top 2% of the world as far as how much we earn and everything. So that is something we should really be thankful for, even if you are the poorest among us. You globally are one of the richest people in the world. But even if everything is taken from you, you literally have nothing left, you still have God. God still has you. Trust in the Lord and rejoice that the God of the universe, no matter how desperate things feel, he's looking down upon you, and he has a plan to turn it to good. You just have to trust in him, and it might not be something you see in your lifetime, but God sees the full, bigger plan where you don't, and you just have to kind of trust in that. Paul continues a little bit. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Once again, we have to remember, Paul is writing this while he is in prison. He's not saying, don't have worries. He's saying, don't be anxious. There's a little difference there. Worries are normal. You're going to have worries. But when we have those worries, we are to bring those by prayer and supplication to God. Let your requests be made known to God. So that is, cast your worries on him and trust that he will provide for you, protect you, and even if you are to lose your life, as Paul says, he will count it as gain, because that means we get to go to heaven. Prayer and supplication. Supplication literally means just like bringing it to God. Yeah. Bringing it to God and requesting help. So when things seem too big for you to handle, request help from God. The last one here. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. That one often gets taken out of context as well. That does not mean you can achieve anything you want because God's on your side. Yes, God will help you achieve things if you're following God's will. And he can bless those things and make things happen. Yes. But that's not what Paul is saying. This is talking about God's provision. And if we read the verses leading up to it, and keep in mind that he is in prison, kind of brings it into a little more context. Starting in verse 11, not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. So this is more well suited to think I can endure all things through him who strengthens me. We can, when life is rough, we can lean on God. When we are in the midst of the storm, we can rely on God and we put our trust in him to get us through. Yeah, so that is often taken as a standalone verse to say you can do anything. You got it. But that's more, I can endure. I can survive. I can count it all as joy, even in the midst of the struggles. Those were the verses that I see in this section, at least, that oftentimes are taken out of context. But I thought the sign off was really cool. So he's in prison. I think he is in Rome at this time period, awaiting trial, I believe. And he, in his sign off, he says, the brothers who are with me greet you. All the saints greet you, especially those of Caesar's household. So I just thought that was kind of cool, that while he's in prison, he is still fulfilling his mission, which he knew he was to go preach the gospel to the emperor, basically. He just didn't really know that the plan to get there involved being in prison. But he's making the best of the situation he's handed, and God is working through him and doing great things with it. And one of those things is he is introducing the gospel to Rome and to Rome's most important people. And he is converting people in Caesar's household, which is just amazing. So that is at the end here. He's basically telling the Philippians, thanks for your financial support. I really appreciate it. Look, it's not going to waste. I'm actually converting people. God is doing great things. Thank you again for your help. Because he's in prison, and at the time, prison didn't really provide you with anything, so you kind of had to provide your own amenities and food and stuff like that if you wanted to be somewhat comfortable and eat on that. So I just thought that was great. A little sign off there. And he kept it vague because I'm sure his letter was being read by the Romans before it was sent out to the Philippians. So he had to keep it vague as to not specifically name people or positions of people who are now being converted. Yeah, that was kind of what I got out of this week's reading. I would love to hear what you got out of it. Until next week, love God, love people. Have a wonderful day.